Joining us now from Capitol Hill is North Dakota Senator Kent Conrad, who is chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you.
Good to be with you.
Senator, so it sounds like we're not even on the eve of the debt limit, and yet each side is going into the trenches. Do you think compromise is even possible? And I say this to you as someone who, as a moderate, is retiring from the Senate this year.
I am retiring, but, you know, I've been part of, for the last 5 years, efforts to bring both sides together. Senator Judd Gregg, who is the ranking Republican on the Senate Budget Committee, and I came up with the idea for a commission. We pitched it to our colleagues. We got 53 votes, but we needed 60. Then the president went forward on an executive order basis and created the commission called the Bowles-Simpson Commission. And that commission I was a part of, 18 of us, 11 of us agreed to a plan, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 1 independent. You can't get more bipartisan than that. And so I still remain hopeful that that provides the best blueprint to deal with our deficits and debt. And that's what I presented to the Senate Budget Committee. I didn't vote on it because I know if we vote on it right now, it'll go down. But as we get closer to the end of the year, as we get closer to the fiscal cliff, when all the tax cuts expire, when the sequester is about to take hold, when the unemployment insurance extension ends, when the payroll tax holiday ends, all of these things build toward the end of the year. That's going to be the opportunity, I think, for the grand bargain.
Well, that gives new meaning to the phrase lame duck session of Congress. I think the terminology should actually be flipped. David Corn, who's on our panel, wrote a book about this very topic, Showdown, the inside story of how Obama fought back against Boehner, Cantor, and the Tea Party. And David, I want to bring you in here because there is a lot of talk about whether we're going to see a debacle redux this fall/early winter. Tom Coburn said something really interesting to Ezra Klein. He said if Obama wins and the GOP controls Congress, Coburn says, we've had conversation where President Obama told me he'll go much further than anyone believes he'll go to solve the entitlement problem if he can get the compromise. And I believe him. I believe he would. What do you make of that?
Well, that's interesting. And this is a question to put to the senator as well, because last year there was called the Gang of Six, 3 Republican senators, 3 Democratic senators, who came up with a plan that was close to the Bowles-Simpson plan and something that the president endorsed more or less in general terms. And the real problem was on the Tea Party side of the Republican caucus of the House. They just couldn't see any revenues, and they basically blew things up, and they forced Boehner to pull out of those negotiations for the grand bargain. So the question is, and this goes to what Tom Coburn said, is there a way for Democratic and Republican senators to be more assertive in coming up with a compromise and a solution here that in a way gets around the Tea Party Republican obstructionist opposition? I'm not sure there is, but it's a big task.
Senator, is it the Tea Party's way or the highway?
That seems to be their attitude. Let me just say this. David, I think, has put his finger right on it. Look, I think the opportunity is going to come later this year. The group of 6, which I've been a part of, is now a group of 8. There are 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. We are working very assiduously to put together the legislative language and all of the scoring that will be necessary. So the homework is done in case the time is right. But I think Speaker Boehner is going to face a real moment of truth. And the moment of truth is going to be, does he insist on whatever plan goes forward has most Republicans in the House being for it? Because if that's his requirement, he's got a real problem. If he is willing to put together something on a bipartisan basis that has a substantial number of Democrats as well as Republicans in the House marching together with members in the Senate, then there's a chance.
Richard, what do you think about that statement, Boehner's position on this, if he's willing to accept bipartisan compromise or whether he's beholden to his Tea Party, Tea Party members of the caucus?
These decisions are going to come to a pressure point after the election. The lame duck Congress, the Bush tax cuts expire, the sequesters kick in, and at that point, you can see a compromise plan that actually the grand compromise will come then. The debt ceiling will be lifted as part of this overall deal. But Boehner will have this choice. Does he go for the majority of the majority or the majority of the House? And my guess is that he's actually a practical guy, and there will be no alternative to this bigger deal. Otherwise, everything falls apart. And they don't want to see all the Bush tax cuts go. The default position, really, the president has more cards in his hand than Boehner does. Boehner has the debt ceiling. The president has all the Bush tax cuts expiring and the defense cuts going through. So if they do nothing, the deficits come down substantially. More of the Democrats will be happier. And John Boehner really doesn't have a whole lot. So he's got a very practical choice ahead of him. Does he take a short-term hit from his base, or does he allow the whole thing to spin apart? And that's where he can get a majority. There are enough Democrats and Republicans who would vote for that package.
Well, and I think a lot of people think, it's not insofar as a lot of people think Mitt Romney is actually a moderate Republican. A lot of folks think John Boehner is a moderate Republican that is just forced to sort of march to the beat of a very strident
package and survive as Speaker is the big question.
Right.
Because last summer he couldn't. People came to him, moderate Republicans, who wanted to go ahead with the deal and said Eric Cantor and others are basically plotting against you. You can't go any further down this road.
He may not survive anyway, depending on what happens in this election.
And Senator, as a moderate, I mean, we've talked about the purge of the moderates, the exodus of the moderates. Are you bullish or bearish in terms of the direction of the U.S. Congress and what may get accomplished in 2013 and beyond?
You know, it probably doesn't matter so much whether I'm bullish or bearish. What matters is, are the American people going to insist that Congress behave responsibly and reasonably and come together around a true compromise, one in which, yes, the entitlement programs are reformed, but also the tax system is reformed to generate additional revenue to help reduce this deficit. You know, we've got a situation in which revenue is almost at a 60-year low in this country as a share of the economy. And our Republican friends say, oh, don't touch revenue. Really? We're going to leave revenue at a 60-year low? That's just not plausible. It's not serious. And so there has to be the kind of compromise that I think Richard Wolff just described.
Senator Kent Conrad, that sounds hedgingly bearish, or maybe pessimistically bullish. I'm not quite sure, but thank you for joining the program, sir, and thanks for your time.
You bet.